Hi everybody, I'm Alister Benn and you're watching Expressive Photography. Welcome to the latest edition of the critiques that Adam Gibbs and myself are doing here on my channel. And if you want to see more of this type of thing, jump over to Adam's channel where he is also posting another photograph that I'm commenting on and giving my feedback on. In this series, what we're hoping to do is to highlight some of the things that we notice. We're both photographers with a lot of years behind us. We've been doing this for a long time and we have learned a thing or two in that time. We are trying to divorce opinion somewhat, but at the same time, we are obviously going to have our own personal preferences. And we may suggest those as a direction that the artist may choose to take their photographs in. Not because we think it's necessarily the best way, but it's just an alternative way. And by exploring these alternatives, it's a learning opportunity for you and us and the person who submits the photo. So don't take it all too seriously. Enjoy yourself, sit back, maybe hopefully learn a thing or two, or get into a debate. Jump into the comments and tell us what you think that would be a better way to approach the photo, or how you think the consequence of the artist's choices are impacting how you feel about it. But without any further ado, jump in and have a look at today's video, and don't forget to give us a thumbs up and go over to Adam's channel and have a look at the other photograph that we have reviewed this week.
Now then, this photograph by Julia has some really great things happening in the foreground and also in the sky here. The middle ground for me, though, is there's not an awful lot happening, and there's a few things about this photograph that I find just a little bit kind of off kilter. First of all, because we have such dominant shapes and tones, darker tones on the right side of the photograph, it feels very weighted to that side. So all the interest and the weight are on this side of the photograph, whereas there isn't really an awful lot going on. Now, I think I can see why Julia composed the image this way, is because we have these clouds sweeping out into the sky like this. So she's given this side of the frame lots of room for those clouds to kind of spread out. I do quite like the treatment with the ND filters or the long exposures, and I do this quite often with my own photographs. I'll often find that unless we're trying to capture really big waves or movement in the waves, then sometimes the details in those waves can be quite distracting. So if you really want to simplify things with images where you have a lot of ocean or moving water that's not really helping your image, then I'll often use an ND filter to just smooth things out. It's not everybody's taste. I know that not everybody likes that smooth water effect, but I quite like it myself. Now then, there are a couple of things we could try here just to kind of give the photograph a little bit more balance. The first and obvious one would be to crop this. And personally, I would probably crop this so that it might be more of a square. And the interest, of course, is on this side of the frame for me. I don't think this rock really needs to be in the frame. And you'll notice that now it just seems a little bit more balanced. If we wanted to balance this out just a little bit more, I would probably, we'll just do this really quickly, just brighten up this section down here just a little bit. And the way we can do that is we can paint that in and then just bring up the whites ever so slightly. So now that we're kind of balancing out this side with this side here, we have this dark brooding cloud in the middle, but I think most of you will probably agree that it's just kind of balanced that section out. If we darkened it, again, it looks kind of weighted to the right side. So that's one option. If I was going to leave this the way it is, then I would still do the brighten up this side. I often do this. To brighten an area, I won't bring up the exposure. I'll just bring up the whites, because you'll notice as we use the whites, it's not really affecting the shadows. It's just the white section there. And we can also warm that up a little bit, just ever so slightly. The other thing I would probably do is try to bring out more of the textures in the water here. So I'm just going to grab another brush, and I'm just going to paint this in really loosely around here, something like that. And again, use the whites to bring up those details. And you'll notice as we bring them up, it adds a lot more texture into that section. So we're adding a little bit more interest in that area. So there's just a couple of really quick ideas. As I said, I do find it a little bit off balance, and there isn't an awful lot going on in the middle here, although I do notice that there's some a really nice transition in the color here. So again, you could perhaps do something with that. Let's just, I've already painted a little bit in there. I didn't really want to do that. Let's just delete that. Let's grab a brush again, and we'll just bring down the size of it just a tad. So we could just bring up the whites again just a little bit, and perhaps just bring up the saturation. So trying to bring out that that greeny blue color in the center here, just to add some interest and more of a transition between that dark area and this here. And then if we cropped that, say 1:1, you'll see that that just adds just a little bit of interest in that central portion there. Those are my thoughts anyway. As I said, it just looks a little bit off balance, but certainly a dramatic day, that's for sure.
So this is a classic seascape from a location I think many of us know quite well, up in the north of Europe. And there's a lot to take in a scene like this. We obviously have the pointed peaks in the background there, some quite nice foreground geology, and in particular these reddish boulders, which are obviously covered in little, whatever they're called, mini limpets or whatever. The way those reddish rocks relate to the nice blue in the ocean there, I think creates some very lovely colour contrast. As many of you now know, the way I tend to critique images is based on how they make me feel. And these feelings are of course somewhat subjective. You know, they may make you feel differently, but the purpose of this critique is for me to try and explain what it is about the scene that makes me feel a particular way, and hope that that may help you to understand how or why an image is making you feel a particular way. So that's my angle on all of this. As many of you know, I talk an awful lot about the 5 triggers: luminosity, contrast, color, geometry, and atmosphere. So in this particular scene, we have some strong geometry, pointy mountains, angular boulders, somewhat of a triangle down here in the bottom right-hand side. There are angles, both real in terms of this angle and obviously the angles of the peaks, but there are also implied angles which come from these. Our brain wants to organize the world into some kind of balance, and what we do is we create relationships between things. So all of these things are working, lots of nice angles, lots of relationships between the foreground and the background. When we start to consider the impact of the luminosity on this scene, the brightest area of the scene is way out here on the top left-hand side, particularly along the horizon there. The heavy vignette on this side has darkened the peak somewhat, It almost feels a little unnaturally dark for me, but that's fine. But what the impact of this brighter patch of sky is that it keeps drawing my attention. I really feel as if this whole upper left-hand side of the frame is taking my attention away from a lot of this stuff down on the right-hand side. So it's obviously a very right-heavy composition. Now, of course, we can start trying to rationalize things a little bit and maybe drop it to a 4x5, which gets rid of some of that stuff. And I'm not suggesting these crops. I'm just showing the consequence of the crop. The fact that this is, I think it's a 3:2 native aspect ratio. Yeah, so it's basically full frame on a 35mm type camera. Because it's full frame horizontal, it's essentially quite wide. So the concept is that Julia's bringing us expansiveness, width. If it had been a vertical composition, it would highlight the depth more. So I think if we want to keep in this aspect ratio, we have to consider the influence of this very bright left-hand side versus the quite heavy right-hand side. And what I thought actually might be just the simplest solution here is just to increase the whites and open the shadows a bit on the right-hand side. And very quickly what happens there is that we want to stay on the right-hand side more. I think by opening up, and if I just turn off that adjustment, you can see how difficult it is to stay on the right-hand side with that bright left part of the sky, whereas we open up the right-hand side just with a very simple gradient, and all of a sudden it makes us want to stay over there a lot more. So that would be my assessment of this. There are some little bright patches of water here on the right. They may be worth burning down slightly with a brush. I'll just do that very, very quickly. Probably the easiest way to do that is to take some whites off it and just a little bit with the black brush. We can't go too far, otherwise it's going to start looking unnatural. But again, just those two little adjustments there, I think, allow us to stay on this right-hand side. We haven't changed the relationships of the composition in any way. I may also be inclined to help along the sky a fraction. There's some nice luminosity in there, but I think I might like to see if there was a little bit more contrast in there that we could bring out just by dropping the highlights and increasing the whites. So just a quick before and after from my side. The original on the left, my version on the right. Very subtle shift, but hopefully enough to make it feel as if we've moved forward. So, but yeah, a wonderful place and some beautiful color combinations. And hopefully my suggestion is appreciated. Thanks very much.